around 2008, 15 years ago, around then Don Evans called me up. I'd done a couple of books on Chicago, and he said, I've got this idea for a literary hall of fame for Chicago, and you got to help be on the first board of nominators. And so we worked on that, and in 2010 inaugurated our first class. That's how the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame started, by really paying our debt and our honors to our ancestors. And what a first class that was. It was Nelson Algren, Saul Bellow, the Nobel Prize winner, Gwendolyn Brooks, the first black person to win the Pulitzer Prize, Lorraine Hansberry, who wrote A Raisin in the Sun and was the first black woman to have a play open on Broadway, Studs Terkel, the great writer and interviewer, and of course Richard Wright, who brought issues of race to the forefront in American fiction as powerfully as anybody ever has. I mean, there are so many people that come from Chicago. There are so many great writers, world writers. We didn't even get to Ernest Hemingway till 2012. He had to wait his turn. And then the Hall of Fame grew and said, you know, we don't want to just honor our ancestors, our past. We start with them, of course, but we need to honor the writers working with us today, who are still with us. And so we established the Fuller Award, named after Henry Blake Fuller. And people on there, Hakeem Adamouti, one of the world's great poets, who was one of the major architects for the Black arts movement all over the world. Sandra Cisneros, whose book, The House on Mango Street, is now required reading in many schools. And I know many of you have read that book, and other people as well. Which brings us to today. In many ways, this is so important to us because the people we're honoring today are our future. I wanted to say to you that you stand on the shoulders of literary giants who have changed the world. And you rub shoulders with people still working today. And you've absorbed something of Chicago. Chicago is one of the great literary cities in the world, bar none. And as I was reading some of your pieces, I said, oh, that sounds a little bit like Nelson Algren creeping in there. Oh, that sounds a little bit like this writer or that writer that I recognize. And I was indeed impressed by the work that you turned in. I just can't wait to hear from you, which will be in a moment. But first, we wanted to hear a little bit from the person who this award is named after, and that is Randy Albers. Randy has helped thousands of students find their voice. He was the chair of the fiction writing program at Columbia. He founded the long-running Story Week Festival. His fiction and nonfiction has been published in so many places, and he served a transformative term as president of the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame, for which we just will be eternally grateful. Randy, you've established programs in Moscow and in Prague and in Florence and in Rome, but this may be one of the big ones for your legacy. This one, the Youth Writing Award. We want to hear, we're going to hear a little bit more about Randy later on, but we want to hear a little bit from you now. Randy, can you come up and give a word?
Thank you all for being here today to celebrate the work of these wonderful young writers. I once upon a time was a young writer, not so much anymore. I still write, but I'm not so young. This was the third leg of the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame mission. Richard laid out has laid out all three, but it's the looking to the future leg of this mission. And we're so glad to be able to do this today, to honor these wonderful writers, but also point the way to the future. We hope to build this contest in the future and encourage and recognize more young writers each year. Saul Bellow, as Richard mentioned, one of the first inductees, and somebody I nominated in that round, borrowed a line from Heraclitus to put in the mouth of one of his characters early on. He says, "I never know what I think about something until I say it. Until I say it." Many writers have noted that their main task has been to find their voice. And voice is the sum total of a person's presence. It's gesture and movement. It's thinking and acting, all got into writing, moving from oral to written work. And the only way to find that voice and develop your own vision is by saying what you see and think to an audience, and then listen in your ear to see whether that's working, whether that's right. Today we'll hear young writers who have done well at that process. I wish we had time to hear from all of them who submitted, because they all deserve to be congratulated. During my years as chair of the fiction writing department at Columbia College Chicago, I had many opportunities to speak to high school students at open houses and such. I pointed out to them that creative writing need not be seen as simply a pleasurable diversion on the way to studying STEM classes. And yes, you notice a little bit of an edge when I say that. No, creative writing develops a range of skills and capacities. Voice, vision, perception, abstraction, creative problem solving, sense of address, and others. Useful in a wide range of fields. One great capacity in today's world, and I think it's too often ignored, is the ability to listen and concentrate, to focus. You cannot be a good writer without the ability, as John Keats said, to give yourself over to the hot hand of thought. In an age driven to distraction by the nonstop flow of images and talk coming through cell phones and computers and across Twitter and Instagram, we cannot underestimate the value of those who can bring that focus to their work. So don't let anybody tell you that creative writing doesn't prepare you for the work world, okay? Our world relies, values on the power of creativity and the power of story. And along with those skills, needs an approach that values tolerance and integrity and respect. I hope that you'll take a stand against book banning and discrimination, and lying at all levels of our society. Writing stories helps a person understand different points of view, and we need that ability too. We decided to offer this contest to encourage young writers to write. That's the only way to get better, write. You are doing that, and I congratulate you, not just the winners, but all of the people, the honorable mentions, and all people who entered. Because you displayed one more quality that writers need: courage. The bravery to put your words to the page and then enter them in a contest. I am incredibly grateful for and honored by having my name attached to this contest. As people on the board will tell you, I was not the advocate for it, but I'm very happy to have something of my career recognized, because I had a great career. Still having it. Had teaching at Columbia College, surrounded by colleagues who were wonderful, and students who were eager to learn, striving to tell the best stories they could tell. brought joy and a sense of fulfillment that I could not have hoped for growing up back on my Minnesota farm. And if I had not been associated with the Story Week Festival of Writers and had the chance to share ideas and excitement in fashioning that festival for nearly 2 decades with incredible people like Cheryl Johnston and Donna Seaman and lots of other faculty and students whose energy, intellect, and creative thinking made Story Week what it was, I would not be standing here today and would likely be known only as a mildly eccentric farm boy out of place in the city. Now I have the great pleasure of working with another group of incredibly dedicated and talented individuals on the board of the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame. I owe them huge thanks. I am especially grateful to Barry Benson, who conceived this award, brought the idea to me and then to the board, and found a way to use it as a way to incentivize, recognize, and encourage young writers. Also to board president Amy Danzer and the other talented board members, and to the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame founding executive director Don Evans, a bundle of creative energy. And if you don't do anything else today, meet Don before you go. Most of all, thanks to all the writers who shared their work with us, and to the parents and teachers and friends who have supported the efforts of these young people. It means so much to writers, young and old, to have that support. So I thank you for being here, and now to present the winners of this year's prizes, my former colleague on the writing program at Columbia, a wonderful prize-winning writer in her own right, and a great friend, Alexis Pratt.
Thank you, Randy, and good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to celebrate and honor our writers today. Megan, hi! Congratulations to you, Randy, and to all of the writers here for their impressive work. I am here, as Randy mentioned, to present the winners of the Randall Albers Award. And let me say that it was such a challenge. You guys are amazingly talented, and I look for your names in the future for sure. We are going to have the pleasure, of course, of hearing from our writers, but in addition, the winners will receive a check, an award, and a consultation from DePaul's Blue Book, an anthology of best American high school writing. So, on with the program. Our first writer to share her work is Soraya Hardy. Soraya attends the Chicago High School for the Arts. She's in 9th grade, and that's absolutely crazy when I found that out, that someone this gifted is only in 9th grade, I tell you. She claims our 4th place for her story, Grandfather. What's most compelling about this piece for me is the sharp character development, which is essential to any story that is written. Grandfather comes alive on the page with vivid imagery and through the writer's smart use of metaphor and simile to really flesh out the character. But of course, you don't have to take my word for it. Soraya is going to share her piece now. Soraya Hardy, reading from her story, Grandfather.
Hello, as previously mentioned, I'm Soraya Hardy, and I'll be reading my piece, Grandfather. My grandfather's face sags like a loose tooth. His ears have grown large with age, and in his hand, ceaselessly, he cups a drink that shakes and quivers like a bad memory. The scent of it clings to his breath, and the taste of it tarnishes his inhibitions. When my grandfather drinks, I wish to disappear. I wish that my very existence would cease, so that as my feet press against the floorboards, he won't dare utter my name. Beckon me to pour more into his stained glass. Watch and trace, with graying eyes, the liquor as it hugs melting ice cubes. My grandfather exists, day to day, in a chair that stretches from the window to the coffee table. He leans forward and cracks his back like a fresh book you spread wide. When he yawns, he bellows, and in that moment, my grandfather's louder than anything around, but when he quiets, he's like the pauses between stanzas in a poem. You can hear the clink of ice in his glass as his hands quake. You can hear the crackling of his back or his nonsensical thoughts spreading out of his mouth, but you can hear his yell. He shouts out, arbitrarily, my grandmother's name, Vera. He spreads her name throughout the house like butter on toast. He says that he's making himself known one last time, and in that last breath, he'd like to holler out his wife's name. Let her hear from heaven, so she'll know that her husband is coming home, but I've counted. There's been 95 last times, and I worry that on the 100th, he'll shudder out one last yell and collapse into himself like a bridge. After pouring his glass today, I decided to take a seat. We sit in silence, me on the couch, he in his chair, and he looks to me after a beat. Passes his glass. Have a sip, he says. I won't tell. When he speaks, his voice has a rasp like a rattlesnake. The sound of it gathers your attention. I lift the glass to my nose and inhale the scent of his liquor as if smelling a distinguished glass of wine. I look to my grandfather. Is this a test, I want to ask? And if it is, how do I pass? I take a tentative sip. The coldness of small, barely there ice cubes brush my top lip, and the liquid burns hot in my mouth. Slides like lava down my throat. Despite this, I keep my face a flat facade. I hold no visible emotion and pass him his glass. In his hand, an earthquake hits, and I can hear it then, the clink of ice against glass like a metronome. I want to reach, steady my grandfather's hand, but I decide against it then. Here he is, making himself known. I strike one down in my mind, 96, and when he sucks in air through his mouth, I strike another, 97, when he places the glass merely into the cup holder carved into the arm of the chair with infantile precision, 98, when he leans and the sound of his back pops like a glow stick, 99, and when he yells it, my grandmother's name, one last time, 100, and I sit there stiffly. I sit there awaiting my grandfather's quietus, but he sucks in a breath. He shudders in air. My grandfather breathes. So I strike another, 101. Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you so much.
Congratulations again, Soraya. See, told you. Our next writer, Louise Interrezo, is from Wakanda High School. She is in 11th grade, and she is our third place winner for her story, Just Right. Now, in this particular piece, what I noticed was the building tension that comes through very sharply. That's owed in large part to its nonlinear structure, where well-placed moments of backstory help to create the big reveal. Sharing her work, Louise Interrezo, I apologize, is reading from her story, Just Right. Thank you. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Louise Interrezo, and I will be reading my piece. Yay! Painting was never easy. Leighton knew that when it came to portraits. He especially knew that when it came to people lost to his memory, their faces becoming a dull image in an array of wildfires. His hand shook with a quiet rage, once again furious with the way the paint glistened on the canvas. Too beige, too pink, nothing ever seemed to come close to the rosy cheeks that he so ardently adored. Perhaps another search in his drawers would do. Maybe this time he'd find an old photograph that his hands missed, and maybe this time he'd get the shade of Lillian's blush just right. Leighton will tell you that Lillian was the most stunning person you'd ever come across. He'll tell you that Lillian was a personification of a spring day, fresh, bubbly, warm. He'll tell you that she had the most awe-striking eyes and the most dazzling smile. He'll tell you with a certain edge, almost as if he's struggling to remember just exactly who Lillian was. And when you notice, he'll tell you through gritted teeth that he forgets a lot of things, but never how wonderful Lillian was. Though he will admit from time to time that the details he remembers are hazy. It's harder to pinpoint certain things, especially when their whole relationship was a mix of technicolor blurs. Leighton knows that she had green eyes. He knows that she was a natural brunette. He knows her coffee order and how she likes to laugh when she cries. He knows he loves her, and he knows she did too. At least that's what he likes to remember. Anyone would argue that if she loved him, she wouldn't have abandoned him. Leighton would argue right back. Lillian had no reason to run from me, from us. We were happy. We were going to get married. She wouldn't just abandon me. He can remember the day it happened. The day he woke up, almost no traces of Lillian were left in their shared apartment. Her perfume lingered in the air. It was faint, almost gone. Leighton scoured the whole complex for her, and when she was nowhere, he took to the city. He stumbled into old coffee shops they used to visit. He circled around the city park a few times, just in case he missed her, but he never caught sight of her. No one had. She was gone completely. Leighton threw himself into a frenzy after that. He trashed his apartment, looking for any remnant of that familiar face. Photographs, trinkets, vignettes. He needed something of her, anything of her. It just needed to be Lillian. Every photo of them was gone. Even his phone had been wiped clean. Leighton guesses that Lillian must have gotten to it. After all, his password is her birthday. But he doesn't know why she left, nor why she wanted no part of her life to be in his. He was perfect for her, she would say. And Lillian's word must mean something. It always did. Leighton pressed a hand to his temples, smudging shades of red onto his face. He had been working on this portrait of Lillian for hours, constantly doubling down on himself for each smear that touched the canvas. There was always something off about his portraits of her, but he could never pinpoint what. He ached to get this one right. Maybe then she'd come back. He gazed at the painting in front of him, his eyes scanning for every imperfection that hid within brushstrokes. He took a few stray brush hairs off, but besides those, Leighton thought that this was the closest he had ever been to embodying Lillian. But it was that damn blush. It was too beige from what he remembered, and if she were here, Lillian would say the same thing, though he didn't quite know how to fix it. Pinker, perhaps. Or should he blend it out? The thought bothered him. Why, if he loves her, can he not get this simple detail right? Has it been that long since she left? A muffled scream came from behind Leighton, high-pitched, panicked. Leighton rolled his eyes, turning by the heel of his foot and staring directly at the source. "You're taking away from my creative focus." Another scream made its way to Leighton's ears as he untied the cloth from his company's mouth. She was definitely afraid, he could tell, though a part of him believed that she was more vexed than anything. Rightfully so, Leighton thought, as she was tied up in a stranger's apartment. "Let me go, you creep!" "Now, that isn't very polite," Leighton said as he leveled himself with her. "You'll be out soon, I promise. You'll just have to answer a few questions for me." The girl scoffed. "Why would I answer any of your questions when you knocked me out in the back of a coffee shop?" God, Lillian was right when she said you were insane. So maybe he wasn't a stranger to her. "What do you know about Lillian?" "You're not getting anything out of me. It's been 3 years. Get over it." Leighton's hands turned into fists. Get over it? When Lillian was the love of his life? What an absurd idea, he thought. This woman has clearly never experienced true love. What a shame. "Listen, you will be let out. Just answer whatever I ask of you." Leighton recoiled when he felt something wet hit his face. She had spit on him. He heaved a breath and stepped away from the girl, turning to find a cloth of some sort. His body bristled with annoyance as his fists turned white. She was making this much more difficult than it had to be. Leighton wanted to laugh. Not out of amusement, but disbelief. Why would Lillian associate herself with such a foul person? The girl hissed, her voice laced with vitriol. "I don't know what's not getting through your head. I'm not answering anything, especially not when I'm surrounded by mediocre paintings of a mediocre person." He could take jabs at his character. He could take the demoralizing spit. He could take every clamorous thrash and jarring scream, but to call Lillian mediocre? What right did she have to call Lillian mediocre? Leighton grasped her chin. The action was rough, unforgiving. There was a shake to his grip, and perhaps he could blame it on the coffee he had earlier, but Leighton knew better than to blame his fury on caffeine. The skin around his fingertips turned white, and the girl's once blaring streaks turned into apprehensive mumbles. He wasn't the type to get violent. No, Lillian wouldn't like that. He tried to be gentle whenever he could, but some people just warranted their own demise. Some people deserved to burn, Leighton thought, and this girl definitely deserved to. Lillian would tell him to stop right now, but Leighton was always steadfast in defending her honor, even if it meant a little bit of aggression. "Say whatever you want," he started, his hand moving to her neck, "but remember you are at my mercy. Tell me about Lillian." There was a stillness before Leighton repeated himself, pressing his hand harder than before. "Tell me about Lillian." And in a choked snarl, the girl replied, "Bite me." Painting was never easy, but being an artist had its perks. Leighton owned quite the braggable collection of utensils, ranging from charcoals made in Italy to the sharpest palette knives known to man. He had quite an eye for aesthetics, and his apartment reflected that through the numerous decorations that were littered around, all carefully placed according to light fixtures. And he had an extensive knowledge of color theory, which was very useful for creating still life and portraits alike. Leighton smeared the last bit of his drying acrylics onto the canvas. With a few more strokes, it was done. She was done. Lillian's essence had been captured within a sprawl of chaos and vibrant hues, crafted so carefully by blood, sweat, and tears. And all it took was an extra bit of red to get her blush just right.
Our next reader is Charlotte Hensley. Charlotte is also a student at the Chicago High School for the Arts. She's in the 10th grade. Her piece claims second place, Stratified. What takes my attention about this story is the smart use of character opposites to define personalities and also to reveal what's at stake for the characters. The narrative voice is strong. It is engaging and authentic. Please welcome Charlotte Hensley, reading from her story, Stratified.
Hi, my name is, again, Charlotte, and I'll be reading an excerpt of Stratified to about the midway point to be able to fit it in the time. It was the Monday of my 3rd week at the academy, and I wondered why I'd moved across the country only to disappear into the school's marble corridors. As I searched the faces passing in the hallway, desperate for an aberration from the same repeating rich kid, I was jolted by someone pulling out my earbud and jamming it into her own ear. Celine listened for only a moment before her lips cracked into a wide, almost mischievous smile. "Loveless is like my favorite album ever," she said. It took a few blinks for me to become aware of the specific way she held herself. Her arms crossed loosely, her whole body leaned slightly to the side, a foot or a finger always tapping, and how she managed to style her standard-issue blazer and tie like a prep school Debbie Harry. Something that had been wound tightly within me began to uncoil. "Really?" I asked. "I've been listening to it just to get through the day here." "I've done that too," she responded. She looked me up and down and added, "Hey, I'm glad to finally find someone with taste." From that day on, I was no longer just the new girl on scholarship from Nebraska, buried in a book as classmates discussed weekend ski trips. I'd found another outsider, a partner in crime. Celine and I paraded around the academy as a disruptive unit, and though it was a constant struggle to be her equal and not her follower, we became inseparable. Celine taught me how to be passive-aggressively proper and about French New Wave films. I taught her about the political causes I believed in, the books I liked to read. We snickered at our roommates' earnest preparations for prom and then showed up to the dance dressed as the twins from The Shining. We sang high-pitched, ominous folk songs at the talent show while staring darkly into the audience. Intoxicated by these gestures, we aimed higher. Alfred Lowen had donated millions of dollars to the school to build a new auditorium named in his honor, money he made from his oil company, known for the many tons of oil it spilled into the ocean each year. I had the idea to call out his sins the day of the auditorium's opening, when the headmistress would bring him on stage to bask in the sycophantic glory of the academy. But I'd meant it as a joke, or as a big what-if. Celine, however, latched onto it immediately, planning it out detail for detail. The morning of the ceremony, Celine showed up at breakfast with her skirt pulled up humorously high and her thick white tights customized with a rip on the side, almost as long as her leg. I whispered, "Are you trying to get in trouble before we even do it?" She laughed, brushing me off, and declared, "It'll be my first bothersome gesture out of many today." She winked at me before slathering 2 thick layers of jam onto her toast, giddy, as always, with the desire to take more of everything. Then we did it. First, we slipped into our established places in the auditorium, Celine up in the rafters and me in the projection booth. As Lowen began his speech, Celine lowered stuffed turtles and dolphins onto the stage to confuse. I then used the new state-of-the-art projection system to show videos of dying sea animals covered in oil, while the sounds of their cries blasted from the speakers. As Lowen and Headmistress's confusion turned to rage, we made our getaway, fleeing from the campus's Gothic buildings to the manicured grounds beyond. As we ran through the neatly trimmed maze of hedges, Celine and I tried to quiet our heaving laughter. My breath became increasingly labored, and the green world around me began to spin. Feeling I would soon collapse, I reached out and tapped Celine's shoulder, our agreed-upon signal. She quickly ducked behind the tallest hedge, and I followed her as we toppled onto the ground. We huffed out our breath before making the mistake of looking toward each other and promptly began to snicker uncontrollably again, falling into each other, a jumble of arms and heads and hands gripping shoulders. When we finally managed to stop, we both sat up straight, and I felt spiky branches jabbing through the frizzing layers of my dark hair. I wiped sweat from my forehead and upper lip and watched the pale blue skies stretch gloriously ahead of us, reminding me, somehow, of time and the loss of it. Thank you.
Congratulations again, Charlotte. Our last reader. Our last reader claims first place for her story. Her name is Annalise Budziak. She is a student at Hinsdale Central High. She is there in the 12th grade. And in terms of the contents of the story, this is very interesting in that what's most striking about it is the building dramatic tension. It's vividly told with a sharp use of internal point of view and a narrative voice that really draws the reader in. It's very compelling. And to share their work, Annalise Budziak is going to be reading from the winning piece, A Trick of Light.
Hello, I'm Annalise Budziak, and I'm reading about half of my story, A Trick of the Light. Marcy stood in the middle of the dock, head tipped back to admire the starry night sky. The wind lifted her hair, nudging it behind her shoulders. I was about to sit down on one of the pilings sticking up on the edge of the dock, where boaters would latch their vessels so they wouldn't drift away, when Marcy said, "Do you see that?" I stood to join her, but she stepped forward until she stood at the edge, peering off into the distance. I stepped closer to her, gazing out at the trees in the distance that lined a neighboring island, blanketed in a gentle mist, the stars rising above, the boats and lobster buoys bobbing gently in the sighing waters. It was spellbinding, but it was nothing unusual. "What is it? Where?" She pointed straight ahead. "Don't you see it?" "I see the island." "No, I mean the light." "Like the stars?" I angled my head towards her, but still couldn't see anything particularly noteworthy. I glanced at Marcy to see if she was playing some sort of trick on me. She was still staring across the bay. "No, there's a light across the water." I stepped even closer, squinting into the distance, adjusting my glasses. "What kind of light?" I glanced toward her. She shook her head, eyes still fixed forward. "It's like a lantern, almost. Not a flashlight kind of light. It's kind of red, I think." I still couldn't see it, so I watched Marcy instead. She was squinting ever so slightly, brow furrowed, leaning forward. One of her hands was half outstretched, as if she could physically feel the light, or like she could reach out and snatch it off the horizon and pull it down to show me. Her eyes were glazed over, as if seeing but not. She really was looking at something only she saw. I turned back to the island, trying not to glance at her entranced expression. "Maybe they turned the old lighthouse back on," I suggested, though I didn't believe that. If that were the case, why could she see it so clearly while I couldn't glimpse even a hint of red lantern-like light? Marcy's eyes snapped back to reality, clarity and focus returning to her gaze. She leaned back on her heels and threw a half-grin at me. "Yeah, maybe." I checked my watch. It was already past midnight. We should get going. Marcy nodded, glancing over her shoulder. "Yeah." But the next evening was the same. The light was back and brighter, and I couldn't see it. Every time after was the same, too. She pointed the light out to me, and I told her there was nothing there, just a foggy old island and some stars and some boats. Marcy didn't even look at the stars anymore. She didn't look for new constellations or comets she'd read about in the online news articles, or ships anchored in the harbor, or birds bobbing in the waves so still and serene that they could have been wooden sculptures. She was always looking for that light. It was like nothing else mattered to her. It was like nothing else was real to her, like she herself was barely real anymore. After 2 weeks of this, I didn't bother trying to sit on the piling. I followed Marcy to the edge of the dock, watching her lean forward, ready to anchor her here in case she started to fall. Part of me was afraid that if she tipped too far forward, the water would reach up and snatch her out of the air and drag her under, and I'd never see her again. But I still couldn't help but glance out over the water towards the island. I didn't see the light. "It's not getting bigger or brighter," Marcy said. I hadn't realized I was clenching my fists until they relaxed at her words. "It's the same as yesterday?" She shook her head, but it was almost like she was shooing my words away as she waved me off, not like she heard me and was responding. Her voice grew low and breathy, like she was whispering in a cathedral. No, it's not that. It hasn't been getting brighter at all. It's getting closer." Thank you. And her award.
First of all, Charlene Cruz from 12th grade from Wheeling High School, who wrote a story called The Universal Language. Not here. I was wanting to hear that language. I have to get my glasses. Okay. Anushka Jain, 9th grade from Naperville Central High School. Relationships aren't recipes. I wish I had known that in 9th grade. Anyway, Rory Dwyer, 11th grade, Grays Lake North High School, for a story called Quinn. Oliver Rosen, I'm not sure that Oliver's here, 12th grade from DePaul College Prep, Pizza, a short story. Nadia Raza, 12th grade from William Fremd High School, Jack of all trades is her story. Aria Giacomino, 12th grade, Wheeling High School, for Fireworks and Friendship. And Avery Stoltz, 11th grade, from Oswego East High School, Bath Time's Up. Yeah, we're so happy to have as many people as could come on a Saturday afternoon and fight their way through all the commencement traffic and everything else to be here. And I hope you have found that all just incredibly enlightening and exciting, and get out and tell your friends about next year. Congratulations to the winners, to the honorable mentions, and to everybody who entered this competition. Thank you on behalf of us all.